Oh, it's starting to calm down.
It worked.
Go. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome, everyone. We're here tonight to our first lecture of the season. We're going to talk about the Riverfront North Partnership, and here's Gina Craigo to talk about that. And if any of you have taken a walk on the Delaware, or on you want to go visit a nice place to take a hike or ride your bike, this is the place to go. It's an 11-mile long stretch. There's a couple little areas that are yet to be completed, but it's, there's boat launches, there's trails, there's historic information to read along the way. So there's lots to enjoy. And we're going to hear all about that project. Next month, I wanted to let you know that on April 9th, also Tuesday, Gail McCormick is going to talk about the Swedenborgian Church and the history of that in Frankford. It's called Charity, Change, and Community. Frankford had a Swedenborgian community, and there's a lot of information connected to the people and the organizations and the accomplishments that those people were involved with. And there will be a book available that Gail has written, and there's going to be an exhibit to look at. So there'll be lots of interest there. So I'm going to turn it over to Gail now.
Gina.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I have two G ladies on my mind.
You're fine.
So,
You're fine. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for having me here tonight. My name is Gina Craigo. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Riverfront North Partnership. Susan gave a really good introduction. I'm going to get into the weeds of a lot of the things that she talked about. So thank you for that overview. On a personal note, I was really honored to be asked. I grew up in Northwood for a brief time. Early in my career, I worked in a position that was shared by Spin and Frankfurt Group Ministry. So I walked up past this building many, many times, and I never had the opportunity to come inside. So I'm happy to be here. Riverfront North Partnership is a nonprofit partner of Philadelphia Parks and Rec. So we own none of the property that we work with. It's all city land and public parks. Our mission is to complete and sustain an 11-mile riverfront greenway of parks and trails along the Delaware River from Port Richmond to Torresdale, connecting residents to nature and offering recreation, community building, and environmental stewardship opportunities. That's the official mission. For us, in the little green shaded area, that's kind of the area that we focus on. We look at this being a river renaissance. The 11-mile project spans 6 neighborhoods. It connects 8 parks. Currently, there's 8 segments of trail because we broke the entire trail down into portions so we could chip away at it. We have 3 boat launches. And really what we're looking to do is bring communities back to nature and back to the riverfront, back to the river. There's 3 pillars to our mission. Since we've started, much of the focus has been on creation, just really building these spaces. But we also, now that the spaces are further along in their development, our mission is really starting to focus on how the spaces are activated and how we're caring for the land as well. Sorry, folks. This is the overview of the Greenway. We start in the south at Allegheny Avenue in the Port Richmond neighborhood. Good.
Our screen's not.
Oh. Sorry. I was talking like y'all could see what I was talking about. Sorry about that.
It's not that. This is killing me. The whole thing's there, right? That's the problem.
Okay, there we go. So that's the green shaded area that I was referring to that you couldn't see. There's the 3 pillars of our mission. This is a map of the greenway. Like I was starting to say, we start at Allegheny Avenue to the south in the Port Richmond neighborhood, and then go up to the Bucks County line at Glen Ford. There are 8 parks along that stretch. 7 were existing parks, and the eighth one I will talk about in great detail. I'm going to just take you on a journey from the south to the north. So at the southern point is Pulaski Park. This is a small pocket park. It's very quaint. It was recently renovated in 2018. It's a great spot for fishing or just relaxing by the river, and it is at the point where the Port Richmond Trail starts. The Port Richmond Trail runs from Allegheny Avenue up to Orthodox Street. It's a 2.2 mile trail. It's a protected side path, flat area, good for biking and for walking. Goes by the Tioga Port Terminal, so it's a little bit in from the river. And this is an example of what it looked like before. Delaware Avenue had been a really wide roadway. Apparently what I hear from my dad, it was a big place for drag racing. The road narrowed, and then that sidewalk was created. We were able to add trees and some greenery along that stretch. Going up from the Port Richmond Trail at Orthodox Street, you'll get to the Robert A. Borski Jr. Park. This park was just officially named in October when the groundbreaking happened. It's a 10-acre park. This map gives an overview of the phase 1 construction, which the project was broken into 2 phases, with the intention of getting this park open as quickly as possible. The shaded area is only shaded because it sits elevated. It's about 10 to 12 feet elevated. And the reason for that is back in the early 2000s when the Bridge and Pratt terminal was rebuilt, they brought the remains of the terminal down here and dumped it and filled it in with a little bit of soil. And a meadow grew. Meadows actually don't need very good soil to grow. So a meadow naturally started to grow. In partnership with the city, we started to treat it for some of the invasives, and the intention with that is that there'll be some nature trails that go through that area. Otherwise, it'll be a great lawn area. There will be a bathroom facility, the parking lot, basically just the nuts and bolts to get this park open. It broke ground in October of 2023, anticipated to be an 18-month project. So that means that it should open in late spring 25. The mild winter has been good for at least that we've pretty much stayed on timeline with that construction project. These 2 pictures, the one shows the aerial of the property. In red is where the park sits. So if you're coming over the Betsy Ross Bridge, you can get a nice view of the park. And then on the right this is along the shoreline. This property had been a previous concrete factory, so concrete plant. So back before we knew better, or before there were as many regulations, the trucks would come in at the end of the day, back it up to the river, lift their dump, and just scrape out whatever was left in the truck. And what's that has done is form what we call concrete lava along the shoreline. So it goes out pretty far and it goes down very deep. What this means is that there's not going to be really riverfront access at this site. There's not going to be great fishing or any boat access, but it really tells a part of the story of what this property is. So we really dig it. And these are two pictures that are more current. The left is that shaded area that I had referenced. The trails are already being carved out, so it looks like a park. And to the right, along the shoreline there, you hadn't been able to even see the river. It was overgrown with a lot of brush, a lot of material. That's all been cleared. The parking lot has been cut, so you can start to see the park taking shape. The next segment of the Greenway is the Delaware Avenue extension. This goes from Orthodox Street up to the Frankford Boat Launch, which is just north of the Frankfurt Arsenal. This is a PennDOT project as part of all their I-95 work, which is a lot right now. And it's a very complicated project. It goes through many property owners. There are rail lines. There's an active dock and barge that is still being used by Advance 6. So it's currently actively being surveyed and planned. The construction for that is anticipated to start in late 26 with a 2-year construction timeline on that. We're really excited because that's a key connection to this entire 11 miles. And that will take you up to the Frankfurt Boat Launch, which is a beautiful passive recreation park. Great fishing, great river views. We always love when the bridge is going up. This picture is not really edited very much. It's really quite a beautiful park. It's got a large boat ramp there with a floating dock that we work with the city to have that installed and maintained every season. It was a former state facility, and we just fundraised to have a master plan done on the project. Back when it was a state facility, it was really for fishing and boating only. So there is a large percentage of the property that is all asphalt, trying to accommodate for all the boat trailers. Not that many boat trailers are needing to be using the space all that more. So there's a lot of asphalt. So we are looking with several stakeholders, with the city, through a consultant on what is the appropriate use of this park. And it's kind of the first step to a redesign and reconstruction of a property as well. So we're excited about that. The Frankfurt Boat Launch is also the start, the trailhead for the K&T. The K&T stands for Kensington and Tacony. It's the old rail line that went through that space. And pretty much the phase 1 of the K&T, it goes from the Frankfurt Boat Launch to McGee Avenue, pretty much follows under the catenaries there. So it takes you from Frankfurt Boat Launch, and then it stops at Lardner's Point Park, which is the park that you see when you go over the Tacony Bridge. You access it off of the Circle on Elbridge Street. Usually the first time you try to go there, you end up in New Jersey, which we try to avoid, myself included, even though that I'm a lifetime Northeast Philly person. But it was an old industrial site. Prior to that, there was a ferry that was there. It was really an abandoned site. We worked with the city, and this was the first park that we worked on the restoration of it. So it's kind of an example of our most finished park. There are a lot of plantings. There is a living shoreline that is there. It's really beautiful. And this is one space too that we're starting to activate with programs. So we have, once the weather warms up, we have yoga classes, we have soul line dancing, we are doing Tai Chi there, we have environmental education programs and bird walks. We're doing a plein air class in May with the Tacony Lab. So really trying to activate the space to get folks there. This is an example before. On the left, you can see that old pavilion that goes out. That's a wonderful area just to get out on the river. Great fishing there. And then on the right, you can see we have kind of like a patio area, different beds, and it really has created great habitat for birds, for other critters. We always see lots of critters in this area. The K&T was broken into 2 phases as well. Again, we always like wins and being able to ribbon cut and open spaces. So K&T phase 2 goes from McGee Avenue up to Princeton. This was a project that has been in the works for about 8-9 years, and we were able to ribbon cut this in August, so it is now open. It's a beautiful section of trail. It doesn't follow exactly underneath the catenaries, which means we're able to plant trees around there, so it's going to be a more shaded area of trail. There's a lot of benches for seating. Some of the historical markers have started to be installed up there that have been worked on for years and years. But it's a wonderful section of trail. And it's very small. It's only about 1.2 miles. But it was very key because it connects 3 trailhead parks. So now you can get from the Frankford boat launch right north of the Arsenal up through Lardner's Point and then to the Tacony boat launch, which is located at Princeton Avenue. Tacony boat launch is another state facility. There is still a concrete boat ramp there. It's underutilized, although it's a very quiet place to go. You always catch some fishermen up there. We are just finalizing the master plan for this site, which the concrete boat ramp will remain, although it's a place that you can only launch and come back in when it's high tide, but also accommodate for some non-motorized boating. So we'd love to see more canoeing and kayaking on this from this space as well. We are just waiting on the final construction drawings. We've already started to fundraise for the construction of this. So hoping in the next couple of years that this will start. From the Tacony boat launch, this section of trail is the Tacony Holmesburg Trail, which is probably our most challenging piece of land that we're working on. It goes just north of Princeton, and only because the developers of the St. Vincent site installed some trail behind their property. So we get almost to Cottman, but from Cottman up through Ron is a very tricky area because it goes through heavy industry that it's still active. So we've tried for many, many years to see how we could stay on the river, but it just does not seem feasible. So 2 years ago, we were able to get $2.5 million from Congressman Boyle for a planning process for this, which we will probably need every penny of that $2.5 million to figure this out. We're looking at this being a street alignment, and thankfully the Philadelphia Streets Department has been very supportive of conversation and planning this out. So it's challenging, but it's doable. So we're looking forward to moving that along. From the Tacony Holmesburg Trail, just north of Ron Street, you get to Pennypack on the Delaware. Unfortunately, a lot of people refer to this as a prison park because it sits behind the prison at Ron Street. It's a huge hidden gem. Once you get back there, it's unbelievable. This was a former landfill. Back in the early 90s is when it was converted to a public park. There's a lot of ball fields. There must be a firemen's league that plays softball there on the diamonds. There's a huge field for flag football. But in addition to those active fields, there's wonderful walking trails that go along the river. There's also a pier that goes out that we have yoga classes up there as well. It's the base of a lot of our volunteer operations. So we have a volunteer station up there that we can just house some material so it's easier for people to volunteer with us, both as a group and independently. It's also a wonderful spot. It's probably the hottest spot on eBird for sighting. So it's a great spot for migratory shorebirds to see them. And there's also a bald eagle nest that has been returning for years. You know, you've seen it. it's been returning for years and years. It's been there. And especially this time of year before anything is leafed out, you can really see how big the nest is, and even how big it looks from the ground. They say that the nest itself is actually the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, so it's huge. But there's wonderful birding, so you always catch birders up at Pennypack on the Delaware as well. Baxter Trail is a trail that goes it starts at the bridge, this bridge that goes over the Pennypack Creek, and it goes up to Pennypack Street, which is just around where the fire training facility is. It's also where the police training facility is. So we've worked with the city on restricted openings for this portion of trail. So Baxter is open from Memorial Day to Labor Day, on weekends only at this point. We still try to have this conversation. It's a very popular stretch of trail, and we know that people want this open. But so we're continuing to push that conversation along to see if we can get it open for longer times. From there, the trail goes out on State Road. So if you're going up State Road past Baxter Water Treatment Plant, it's a protected side path that goes along State, and that's the way the trail will go until Bucks County. But at Linden Avenue, Pleasant Hill Park is also one of the parks that we help steward. I always knew this as the fish hatcheries. The ponds are still there. We hold fishing program at the ponds there at Pleasant Hill. There are fields, there's the boat launch there as well. There's a very active playground. It's probably one of our best used parks as well. We also have our stewardship base of operations up there, so we're in and out of that space a lot. But it's a wonderful, wonderful, quaint park. And then lastly is Glenford on the Delaware, which is just iconic and beautiful. It's one of the widest points of the Delaware, so the river views there are stunning. Glenford has its own organization that helps to manage the property, the mansion, and all the events that go there. So they hold most of their program there, but we work in collaboration with them when we can. And that is the final spot. The Bequesting Creek is right to the north of that, and that's where the city line is and the city ends. So that's a snapshot of the Greenway and who we are. So why a Greenway? Many of you may recognize the face. That's former Congressman Bob Borski. He was in Congress from 1983 until 2003. And when he was in Congress, his main role was on the Transportation Committee. So he would travel around to cities around the country and see how they were using their riverfront, and saw the residents enjoying their riverfront. And then would come home to Northeast Philadelphia, and in our riverfront, we see the prisons and the landfills and the heavy industry, and 95 bisecting the neighborhoods to the riverfront. And it was something that always kind of stuck with him that he wanted to do for the residents of Northeast Philadelphia. So when redistricting happened in 2003 and he retired, he made this his project. And in leaving Congress, he was able to secure funding to start this organization. I think thinking that we would accomplish this in about 10 years. So, 20 some years later, we're still doing it. We're still working at it. But really, it was his vision to return the riverfront to Northeast Philadelphia. Up until last year, he was still chairman of our board. He's still very involved. We still get phone calls. He's walking the trail, asking questions. And he's just been a phenomenal supporter of making sure Northeast Philadelphia is given this opportunity. Before heavy industry, before 95, people used these spaces for recreation and to enjoy it. This is a picture from Pleasant Hill Park where the fish hatcheries are. It was a really popular bathing beach. There was fishing on the left. It was actually a dolphin that they caught, which I don't think we would see all that often anymore, but fishing had always been very popular along the Delaware River. On the right, that is Bridge Street, going down to what had been a wharf at Bridge Street. Bridesburg had a very popular public access to the river. And over the past couple of years, when I would talk to especially younger people from Bridesburg, they didn't even realize that they were a river ward because you can't see it and you can't access it. It was a beautiful wharf. People would go down there to skip stones, to just to enjoy the river, to fish. And it was largely popular. And pretty much overnight, I think in the 1950s, I think it was, it pretty much, they shut off access. And then Bridesburg had no longer had public access to its riverfront. There was actually ice skating on the Delaware River. I don't think we'll be ice skating anytime soon. But there would be the folks will be out ice skating. This is the Columbia Yacht Club. There are still a good number of yacht clubs that are along the stretch. Columbia is one that did not survive, but it was a very popular one. It was up at Pleasant Hill, where Maggie's is, the restaurant up at Linden Avenue. There's a row of what looks like relatively new houses. That's where the Columbia Yacht Club was located. And there were boat races where the folks would come together, both club members and just the community, to watch the boat races. There were boat races down in Bridesburg as well. There was transportation. There was a paddle boat along the Delaware, in addition to the Tacony Palmyra Ferry Company that got people and cars across the river before the bridge was built as well. So people really depended and really enjoyed using the river, and they hadn't had that opportunity in quite some time. So this is indeed a renaissance. We had our own boathouses in Bridesburg, our own Boathouse Row. And I don't know if this is going to work. This is a video when COVID hit and we couldn't really engage with any of the community. We tried a bunch of different things, but one of the things that we did where we did phone interviews about people's experiences with the river. We called it Riverways, and this interview was with Teresa Pyote, who was very active with the Bridesburg Historical Society, and I understand she just passed away recently, so this one kind of stood out to me, but it's a great story about her experience with the river, and hopefully it'll play. I don't think it is going to. We do have a website that houses both this interview and some others, but it was a great story about her talking about that Bridge Street Pier and going down there. There was a gravel company next to it, so the kids would go throw the stones. The teenagers would go down at night. But there was a deviled clam vendor that would come around the neighborhood calling out for deviled clams. So it's a wonderful story. I would gladly share it, and I apologize that it's not working. I figured there would be some tech issues. But people had a real relationship with the river. So we do look at this as a river renaissance. The construction we see is nearing completion, or at least we have a plan for it. So now we are shifting to the other two pillars of our organization with activation and stewardship. We are a small staff. There are currently 9 of us, with 3 of them working out in stewardship, trying to maintain those 11 miles. But we look to get these spaces full. When public spaces, when parks and trails are busy and there are people there, that's when they're safest and that's when they're most enjoyed. Spaces are a little bit more intimidating when people are not there because they look like they're not cared for. So our programs have been a great success. Everything that we do is offered free of charge. We're always open to new ideas too. Really, we just want to respond to what the community likes. So in 2023, we hosted 205 free programs. We've removed 4,000 pounds of garbage. Unfortunately, with the combined sewer system in Philadelphia and the tendency for the short dumping, we'll always kind of be in the garbage business. But we work very tirelessly at making sure that we remove the garbage from these spaces. We planted 205 trees and 200 other plantings. We held 40 volunteer events with 455 volunteers, 2,456 volunteer hours, and that's with both individual members, school groups, corporate partners, and we also partner with some job training organizations to work with them on both job training and stewardship. And then for 2023 was a big year for us because we celebrated one section of trail opening and one park groundbreaking, which has not happened in quite some time. So we were very excited about that. That's all I have. I'd be glad to answer any questions and share. I can share my information, including the link to that website too, because there are some great historical stories that are on there. Yes.
Larner's Point South, is it lit up in the evening?
No. Generally the parks, because they are city parks, they are open from sunrise through sunset. So technically the parks are not open. There are some lights at Larner's Point, mostly around that Levick Street entrance. They're solar powered, and the solar powered technology is pretty challenging, so they don't generally work all that bright. But the trail is not lit up, mostly because it's a city park, which is supposed to close down at sunset.
For our programs, it's helpful if you repeat the question because we have no microphones out here.
Thank you. Thank you. So the question, if that wasn't obvious, was that are there any lights from Larner's Point South? Yes.
What responsibility does Riverfront North have for wildlife management? So at Pleasant Hill, between Linden and Arundel, last year I saw otters in the river. And besides the eagles behind the prison, red-tailed hawks. And where the water department has a pistol range, which they rent to the city. If one walks to the top of the berm and looks down, sometimes as many as 100 deer will speak. So deer migrate there because they have access right up the river, cross underneath Broad Street, up through Pennypack Park. So Philadelphians, they said herd of 700 or 800 deer. Sometimes they're on the trail. What responsibility does Riverfront North have in managing that?
So the question was, what responsibility does Riverfront North have in managing the wildlife? There is quite a bit of wildlife, both birds in the water, there's otters, but really the question, from what I understand, was about the deer, the herds of deer.
Deer.
Yes. So we don't have an active role in wildlife management. What we see our role as is habitat creation. So maybe not necessarily for the deers, because I think that's a bigger topic, but making sure that we're putting plantings in that have an ecological benefit, up the chain. We work with the Game Commission if there's any issues, but that's usually in response to if there's any issue. Like we kept having sightings of a mangy fox. So every time we had a sighting, we would call the game officer to try to trap it to see if it could receive treatment. But we would act in that way. If there's any issues that need some assistance regarding wildlife, we would try to call in the appropriate partners. But nothing more than that. The deer are very interesting though. We have pictures of the deer swimming across the Delaware as well. Maybe not at Pleasant Hill. It's a little bit wider there, but down in Bridesburg, the deer will swim across the Delaware.
Go hang out in New Jersey.
Yeah. Better eats there probably. It's a little bit more naturalized on the New Jersey side. Yes.
When you're talking about cleaning up garbage, are there any plans to get rid of that boat that's down at Delaware?
The boat. So the question was, especially in response of our work getting rid of garbage, is there any plans to get rid of the boat at Pennypack on the Delaware? On the southern end at Pennypack on the Delaware, there's a boat that has run aground, and it's really quite sad because at one time that boat was very beautiful and very expensive. That was actually, it was probably when I first started, almost 5 years ago. The boat had really just been abandoned and was like cut loose from wherever it was docked. But there was a lot of, I guess it's not my responsibility on who actually would address that as the boat was kind of going up and down the river, kind of unmoored and, just kind of going on its own. We tried to contact some of the authorities, the Coast Guard, Fish and Boat, Philadelphia Police, and there was not an easy resolution on that. And unfortunately, the boat ran ashore, and now it's so embedded in the mud that I don't think we'll get that out easily. So we're probably better at transitioning that to like a reef or something. But it's really well ashore now. So
And it's also being on fire.
yes, yeah, there was a fire situation with that too. Yeah. Yes.